All right, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll get started here in just a moment. But if you'd like to drop into the chat, let us know where you are joining us from. We'd love to hear from you. And then in just a moment, we'll introduce our amazing panelists. All right, we're at the top of the hour, so it's nice to have everyone joining us today. Thank you so much for joining our final IT Specialist Academy webinar this afternoon. If you've joined us before, you know, my name is Hannah Crepeau. I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Certiport, and we are going to have a wonderful discussion today with some amazing IT experts. So if you're joining us, you'll notice that your microphone is muted. If you have questions, we welcome those. Please feel free to drop those into either the Q&A or the chat feature, and we'll make sure to address those with our panelists as we go throughout our discussion this afternoon. Today, we're going to be talking about how to prepare students for careers in IT. So this is a wonderful chance to meet some IT professionals and figure out what the future of IT looks like and how you can prepare students with those skills. Now, our first panelist is Lisa Balbach. Lisa started her career as a programmer and analyst. While working on a system development team, Lisa was given the task of training others and discovered a passion for teaching. After training, Lisa earned a master's degree and made the move to teaching college-level computer courses full-time, which has continued for over 30 years. She currently teaches CIT developer courses at Northwestern Michigan College and has taught a variety of computer-related courses, including traditional programming, web programming, database, office application, system analytics and design, and graphic design courses. Our second panelist is Priya Kumar. Priya is currently the Vice President of Technology at Pearson VUE. She's a thought leader and has always stepped outside her comfort zone and taken risks in her career. Her journey at Pearson started in 2008 as a project manager, and she's grown over the last 13 years into a leadership path where she has not only grown personally, but also developed other women and female leaders on her team. She serves as on a Women and Leaders in Technology board and volunteers time with her city's Sustainability Commission. And our final panelist is one of my close friends from my competition days, so I'm happy that we are able to bring Nick in with us. Nick O'Donnell is based out of Minneapolis and works as a cloud security engineer at Optum with a focus on Azure and Microsoft 365 security. He holds a BS in Network and Security Administration from Dakota State University, where his cybersecurity skills grew through participation in collegiate cyber defense competitions and specialized coursework. In high school, Nick earned multiple Microsoft Office Specialist titles through Certiport and took first place in the 2016 MOS U.S. National Championship in Microsoft Word, going on to represent the U.S. at the MOS World Championship. In his free time, Nick also helps to manage the IT infrastructure of a small rural school in his hometown of Bozeman, Montana, and maintains a home lab for learning and testing the latest cloud technologies. So what an amazing group of people that we have here with us, and we are so privileged to have all of you joining us this afternoon. I know I've given a brief introduction into what you guys do, but I wanted to give you guys a chance to tell our educators a little bit more about yourselves. So Lisa, if it's all right, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you to introduce yourself and your field of IT.
Okay, so I've been teaching for quite a while, and I'm currently teaching developers. We have an AAS degree, and I teach the SQL courses. So I teach database. I teach basically full stack web programming. So I do client and server side courses, and I also do the Microsoft courses. So we have a web application course where we do MVC and Razor pages. I do a systems analysis course and an object-oriented programming course where the students actually work in teams, and they work on various projects, and they use GitHub. We have them working with their teams, teaching them, you know, how to push and pull and create branches and all that kind of fun stuff. We also use agile development. So their teams are learning those skills as well. So we try to make them pretty well-rounded so that when they graduate, they can get jobs. And they have been getting pretty good jobs. So,
So it
we're
looks
pretty
like you're
happy about
doing
that.
your job well.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And most of the classes that I teach for the final exam, they do have to do a certification exam, professional certification. And in addition to a final project. So the classes are pretty intense, but we have pretty awesome students. So
I
it's all
love
good.
that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. Priya, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself in your field of IT.
Thank you, Hannah. That was very impressive hearing from Lisa. It is my pleasure to be with all of you today. I came to the US on a work assignment in Minnesota and have really called Minnesota my home since 1998. I have an undergrad in computer engineering and an MBA in management that I recently received. I'm currently a technology leader at Pearson VUE. But one thing I want to talk about, from my background, I've primarily worked in product engineering and software development areas within IT. But throughout my career, I've taken on lateral moves. So, for example, when I was a software developer, I had the opportunity to go try a QA lead role. I did not know anything about QA at the time, but I was able to build a lot of appreciation for what that role was. And how it contributes to the team's success. And then for 1 year, I worked on production support early on in my career. I think that was the best time where I was able to really understand why we're building customer-friendly software and why it's so important that we really understand our customers and everything that we build. So that's really, very brief background about me, Hannah.
And I know that we could go into a lot more, so we'll dive into that in just a little bit. But thank you for that quick introduction, Priya. That's helpful. Nick, I'll toss it over to you to wrap up our introductions. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So like Hannah said, I met her and the Certiport team entirely as in high school doing the MOS certifications, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. I think I got almost all of them that we could in the Office 2016 platform and went on to the competitions there. After that, I went to Montana State for a year to do computer science, and it wasn't quite a great fit. So I moved to Dakota State to focus on cybersecurity. And that was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Was able to learn everything about cybersecurity and networking and everything about that. So had a really good appreciation for my college professors and everything that they do. After that, I went on to intern at Optum, which is part of United Health Group in their technology development program. So it was started with interning, and then once you graduate, you do rotations through different departments, learning different skills on different teams. And I stayed with them after that. So now I'm on the cloud security team that owns Azure Identity. So all authentications and authorizations in the public cloud is my team's realm.
Awesome. I love that we have, Lisa encompasses a lot of different fields of IT kind of in her own world of education, but I love that we have so many fields represented. So I'm excited to be able to start this discussion. Lisa, we'll turn it back over to you for our first question is how did you first become interested in IT? I think you've bridged the gap between IT and education. So how did you first come into the IT world?
Well, my first experience with IT, I think I was in junior high, and it was a teletype machine. So, because I'm not that young. But I did pursue IT in my undergraduate. I'm actually from Minnesota, so that's kind of funny that the other two are from Minnesota too. That's where I'm originally from. I live in Michigan now, but so I went to the Carlson School of Management. My major was MIS, and so I was interested in programming kind of from my first day of college on. So when I graduated, I had a job at a private company. And that's where I got into doing a lot of training. So all of their software was developed in-house. And so we would have to kind of go and do some analysis with the department we were going to build the system for. And then once the system was created, we'd have to go back and train them. And I like working with people, so I was the one who got to go train them. And I really liked it. And there was a shortage of programmers at the time I was hired. And so they hired a lot of people who didn't have a programming background. So they had me teach them too. And I kind of discovered I really like teaching. I mean, I love technology, but I also like the teaching. So that's when I went to school, got my master's degree, and kind of moved over into the teaching field. So, I mean, I've always been interested in IT. And so now I get the best of both worlds, because I'm still in all the technology and I get to teach.
Absolutely. I love that. Priya, did you have a different introduction into IT? When did your interest in technology first start?
Yeah, somewhat similar in that it was also during high school. So during my junior year in high school, I had the option to take computer science as a class. Like Lisa, I'm not going to name the technologies I learned at the time. I think they are so outdated right now. But it was really my first chance to explore programming. I don't recall being very passionate about it, the first time, but I do recall that I got more curious, especially, like I liked seeing solutions to a problem. So it's, you'd start out with a problem and just arriving at the end with a solution just made me feel good. But I think the passion came over the years, but it didn't quite start out that way. And at the time of graduating from college, with the computer engineering degree, what the colleges taught in terms of courses at the time and what the jobs were looking for, there was a big disconnect. So it was not easy to find jobs, right out of college. So I went on to an academy or a training center at the time that was teaching AS400 classes. And so I took the class for 3 months. They also helped place me at a company at the end of the course. So that's kind of my journey into IT. I think over the years, what I've seen is just being in IT, change is a constant thing, right? We saw how Lisa's journey has evolved. It's kind of similar for me. I started out with AS400, but my journey's evolved quite a bit. I think it just makes you accept that you have to be a lifelong learner, both personally and professionally in this world.
I love that you also brought up the gap and the disconnect that can sometimes happen between education and the workforce. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more going forward. So I'm excited that you kind of sparked that discussion already. Nick, I'll turn it over to you. You're newer in your career, but I know that you're working with some top line technology. So how did you first become interested in IT?
My first IT was also in high school. Our theater program for lights and sound, the same director of that also was our IT director. So once I got in with that and I started helping them, I was basically a IT technician for the school as a sophomore. So I had all the teachers and students come to me throughout the day and everything. So that kind of started it, and then just went on from there. Home lab's always been kind of fun. I've been tinkering with computers and everything, installing Ubuntu on trying to create a home server in high school, and just learning that way. And then like Priya said, it's a constant lifelong learning, and the technologies expand and just keep going. So going to classes, getting the degrees, and then after joining TDP program and Optum, just keep learning with Microsoft webinars and everything in between.
Yeah, that's one thing I think that I've noticed, and throughout these discussions that we've had over the last several weeks, is how much technology is changing and how rapid that growth is progressing. It requires a lot of dedication on your part to be able to stay kind of ahead of the curve. So that actually sparks my next question that I wanted to ask you, Lisa, is how do you feel like the field of IT that you work in and you work in with your students, how do you feel like that's changed over the last few years? I mean, we've talked about the technology you worked with when you first started, and even Priya mentioned as well, that's completely outdated now. So how do you feel like IT has changed as you're working with these students?
It's constantly changing. I mean, my curriculum that I teach changes from semester to semester. I actually have to go through all of the material because we use Visual Studio, we use VS Code. I have to make sure that it still works with all of the updates that come through. So, I mean, it's constantly changing. And kind of to prepare our students for that, in our sophomore level classes, they have a professional development and a networking requirement. So they have to kind of develop their own personal resources for training, like where are they going to go to learn about what's new and what's coming and new features. And so we're trying to develop that in our students so that when they go into the field, they will be able to do that, because you have to. I mean, I love it because it's not boring, right? I mean, our stuff never is boring. It's always changing. And that's kind of awesome.
I love that you're building up resiliency, right? It's a soft skill to be able to say things are changing and to not look at that roadblock as a barrier, but as an obstacle that you can overcome. So I think that's important, not only with the hard skills changing, but being able to help students be prepared for that lifelong learning pathway. That's so important. Priya, you've mentioned that things have changed for you over the last several years, but what specifically do you feel like has been the biggest change that you've come across?
Yeah, I think my answer is going to be a little bit different in that, yes, IT has changed significantly, and we all recognize that for sure. I think more importantly, what I feel is all the industries that depend on IT have changed in a big way, right? So IT is now driving change in almost every industry that it didn't before. So if you take any industry for that matter, retail, healthcare, manufacturing, even our education space at Pearson VUE or Pearson, IT is really changing how we innovate and compete in our markets. So IT is really no longer that cost center, on the side that's going to help our businesses grow, but it is the enabler and accelerator for growth, right? So it's definitely transformed quite a bit. And even a recent study I was looking at from McKinsey that showed with COVID-19, a lot of the digital adoption has actually taken a quantum leap now, both IT industry-wise as well as other industries that have needed to respond more quickly. Mm-hmm. So I think what I feel now is technology is really a wave. If companies are not riding it and not keeping up with what's going on, they're going to get wiped out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think you put the nail on the head there, that if the pandemic has pointed out so many ways in which industry was lagging behind technology, and it's forced us to think differently about technology and how technology can provide a solution where we obviously didn't think there was one before. So I love that you called that out. Nick, do you have any thoughts? You're new into your career, but how do you feel like IT has changed even since you were in school? What's changed for you?
I think obviously I find cloud computing super interesting. That's a big direction of the world, is moving away from that traditional on-prem network and infrastructure and everything to in the cloud and AWS, Azure, anything like that. I also think bringing up the education and technology in education, not only through the pandemic, but before that, even the adoption of it, especially in the younger grades, getting kids on a Chromebook, getting them typing, getting them programming, all the above. The school that I actually help, we're adopting a computer science program this year. So we're starting to keyboarding in second grade and then up through 8th grade, where they can take computer science coding courses to try and get people interested in computers earlier on and get those skills building, especially because now you go to any job and you need to use a computer. So regardless, you need to know how to type and do everything like that.
Yeah, and I think you called out something that's super important, is that the learning needs to start earlier for you to be able to keep up with technology, because if we start too late, then our adoption isn't going to be on trend with what's happening with technology in the workforce. So Lisa, I'm going to toss it back over to you. I know you've talked about helping your students stay current with the changes in the field and you constantly changing your curriculum. How do you stay connected with what's going on in the workforce, and how do you make sure that your curriculum is matching up with what the industry is demanding of your students?
Yeah, so all technical programs have advisory boards. And so we rely on our advisory board, who they're basically employers in our area. And we, they're familiar with what we teach. And if there's something that we should be adding to the curriculum or changing, we discuss it with them and get their input. And I'm also on an advisory board for another college that a lot of our students transfer to. And what was interesting and what I heard in last year in both advisory meetings is that the employers, especially for developers, they feel that there will be more and more remote jobs in the future. They've discovered that remote works, it saves the company money. And so especially in the developer area, that this is kind of a trend that will continue. And I am seeing that in the students who get jobs. The last two students of ours, in fact, within the last 2 weeks, emailed me and told me they got jobs. And they're both remote jobs, and their starting pay is quite good. So for coming out of a 2-year program, they did great. So yeah, I can see this trend continuing, and it's awesome, especially for us because we're in Northern Michigan. But our students, it opens up, the whole country really to them. So, as far as finding jobs and employment, they don't have to relocate. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I think going back to Priya's comment before about the effects of the pandemic, that's just one more thing that companies are seeing is the value of remote work. I think a lot of more traditional industries typically also required employees to be in the building, everyone's working together. But with technology, it's so much easier to collaborate remotely. And so being able to help students gain the skills, but then they don't have to relocate. I mean, there's just so many options that have opened up as a direct result of that. So I love that you mentioned that, Lisa.
Well, even my brother-in-law, he manages a law firm in San Francisco, and his whole job is remote now. So yeah, it's not just developer, it's a lot of different types of jobs.
Yeah, I've been on the remote work train for a long time. My husband started medical school. We were in Seattle for a long time, and Certiport, for those who don't know, is actually based out of Salt Lake City. And so I've been, working remotely. I feel so glad that, not glad that it took a global pandemic to get everyone going, but it's nice to be able to have everyone working remotely. I think it facilitates a change in the way that we interact with other people. So thank you, Lisa. That was fantastic. Priya, you work in a little bit of a different industry with software development. How do you stay current with the changes that are going on in your field?
Yeah, Hannah, there is a little bit of an overlap with what Lisa said. I do serve on an advisory for CompTIA's Creating IT Futures, where it's very similar. They have a program that they train students in CompTIA certifications, and they have this advisory board that I'm part of, where we bring industry needs to feed the schools that are training these students, to let them know exactly what's going on in the industry and what they need to do there. For me personally, a big part of keeping up with changes is really attending conferences and tech events. Thanks to the pandemic, you can do a lot of these now remotely and without having to physically drive somewhere and attend an event. So I've definitely leveraged that quite a bit, locally and globally. The other thing I do is monitor social media like LinkedIn. I feel like this is a good place, especially if you're following leaders in the industry. you'll get access to a lot of good articles that they're writing originally or they're sharing from others. It's a great place to also learn what's happening and stay current. And one last thing is, being a part of Pearson VUE, our tagline is always learning, right? So making learning a priority and staying current. So it could be a course online that I'm taking once in a while, or learning about what's the trend, or even at some point considering taking a certification. I know Nick is the certification expert here. He's done a lot, but it's definitely something I consider often. Should I be doing that?
Well, I love that you cited several different options, right? There's in-person events, there's virtual events, there's social media. There's so many different ways to stay connected with the changes that are going on in your field. And I think that that's wonderful for everyone who works a different way to be able to have options for how to stay current with the changes in technology. So Nick, we've had quite a few options thrown out. What do you do in your kind of professional development to stay current with what's going on in cloud technology?
I would echo social media is probably the biggest one. LinkedIn, and with the cybersecurity world, a lot of them have gone to Twitter too. So following them and seeing what they're posting, especially their new findings or research that they do, that's always interesting. Also digital events, whether since a lot of them are online now, a lot of them are free. So being able to register and go to those and learn from industry speakers and everyone in between. Like you said, certifications, I am looking at some more Microsoft ones, especially because they focus on cloud and security, both of which I'm using day to day. So kind of all the same.
Awesome. Well, I love that it's all the same types of ideas, even though you guys all work in very different roles, right? That staying connected to technology, the resources are the same no matter what industry you're in or what type of role that you have. Lisa, I'm going to come back to you with another question. You've talked about your advisory board and how you stay connected with professionals in the industry. As you've had these meetings, what are the types of skills that they've requested for those who are graduating and entering the workforce? What are the skills that are most needed?
In the last couple years, SQL was big. They all wanted them to learn SQL, and we do teach them that, and they do have to do a database certification exam as part of that course. And Python was mentioned, so yeah, we are now teaching that. And in that particular course, it's a second-year course, so I move them through the language pretty fast so that we can do 3 main projects. So we do one in Pygame, we do one with data analytics, and then we do one in Django, so they can learn just kind of how that framework works. And so they're kind of seeing the different flavors of Python. And they've also recently said React. So I am looking for a way to incorporate that into our existing classes. That is my current task, is how to work that in. And of course, we always teach the software design concepts and architecture and all of that as part of what we teach. So yeah,
they're keeping you on your toes for sure.
Yeah, but those are kind of the main areas they've been talking about lately. So
I love that. Awesome. Priya, you work with managing other people, and I'm sure as part of that, you hire some people onto your development team. What are the skills that you're requesting of the entry-level developers coming into your team?
Yeah, for us, we're a Java shop, so definitely, basic Java programming and advanced Java programming. Those are skills we look for, especially during our summer internship program. We also look for people with AngularJS, React, as Lisa was talking about some of those skills as well. But I think if we are talking about today, those are the skills. We're talking about what do we need for tomorrow. then that's a changing landscape. I think cybersecurity that Nick is talking about, that is great space to be in. We didn't talk about AI. I'm sure it's everywhere. You see it always in the news. AI-driven changes. I think this is the future. Automation in many industries and bringing efficiencies through AI is going to be will be a big change. I also think data-driven decisions and companies using data very differently from how they do today. All of those skills will be needed quite a bit in the future. But I think if we are thinking about training, students with these skills, they are changing every day. So it's, I'm sure Lisa's world is pretty hard because it's no longer the case where you learn a skill, you're done with education, and you can go settle down in the field, right? It is this continuum of learning and lifelong learning that has to continue for everybody, all of us. And so while there are changing trends and technologies that we look for, I think this landscape is also evolving every day.
Yeah, and being able to stay connected through the channels that you guys mentioned for what's coming up. And I love that you called out the difference between what employers are looking for today versus what's going to be happening tomorrow, because we do know that those skills are going to be different. Nick, do you have anything to add? Any thoughts about that?
I would just echo the Python, especially because it's so universal, and the automation it can do, just automation in general. And I have to put a plug in there for cybersecurity. You can see in the news there's more breaches and attacks every day. It's becoming a really big thing, especially in healthcare or systems that everyone relies on. They need cybersecurity individuals to keep them safe and operating.
Love that. Thank you for your thoughts on that. So I wanted to end with a couple more questions, and they kind of overlap, but Lisa, you're on the forefront of this, so I'm hoping you're okay to kind of take the brunt of this question. But what can today's educators do to prepare IT professionals, your students, for tomorrow's careers? What do you think is the advice that you have to share with our attendees?
So as far as their technical skills go, because things are constantly changing, personally, I feel like if they have a really good understanding of a programming language, it's not hard to pick up additional languages because it's just syntax, and like I know a bunch of different programming languages, and the first one is usually the hardest, but once they've got that down and they understand it, then picking up additional ones, they should be able to do that. And so I think the students have to enjoy learning. They have to love technology. So that's kind of on the technical side, but then there's soft skills. And I think that that's an area, some people don't like calling them soft skills, but that's what we're hearing employers talk about the most is, they have to be able to work in a team. They have to be good communicators, and professional, and especially, in a remote environment, you still want to be professional, so, sitting in your footy pajamas on a Zoom call is not very professional. So, you should prepare for it like you do any kind of job. So, that professionalism, and that type of thing, we work with our students on too, and especially the sophomore year, having them work in teams and picking a team server where they're going to communicate. And we have them set up Trello boards with when they do their sprints, and things that are used in the field. We get them into that second year to kind of try to get them ready. And so even if, and we do conferencing software, and, even if like we're using Zoom, if they work in a company that uses Microsoft Teams or NetMeeting or something else, you can adapt, right? Because you've been there already. So trying to expose them to different things that they might see out in the field next year or 5 years from now. I think that's kind of important too, getting them kind of comfortable with that.
Well, I feel like there's so much to unpack from what you shared, Lisa, and that's such great advice. But the main takeaway I have then is to build a solid foundation, right? Starting with the programming languages that they're going to need as they go into the workforce, but then also building on top of that, the level of adaptability, those soft skills to be able to leverage the hard skills that they have in maybe a different way that they anticipated, right?
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, working in teams is pretty important.
Yeah.
Because in the field, you don't work by yourself.
Right.
You know, so you're part of a team working on a project.
Yeah.
And so just getting that mindset is important.
Yeah. And I remember, I mean, Nick is probably closer to this than any of the rest of us. Sometimes team projects can be hard, right? If you're not able to kind of jive with everyone, or if you have different personalities. But it's true, like when you get out into the industry, there's never going to be a time where you're working completely independently. You're always going to be relying on other people, other teams to be able to help you accomplish all that you need to do. So I think that, yeah, that is so important. Priya, did you have any other thoughts to add? What we can do for our educators, what advice you would have to share with them?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Lisa on, developing those soft skills, or whatever we call those. But I think we can also say it's the EQ on top of the IQ. So when we are looking to hire students during our internship program, it's not simply about, scoring the highest in the algorithm tests or anything. That's one part of the equation, but a bigger part is really the EQ portion of it. Can this person work on a team? Can they work with different personalities? How are they going to fit culturally on the team? So a lot of those factors go into the decision making. So educators, if they're aware of that and can prepare students to be those type of professionals, it would go a very long way. I also think, how educators used to do things before has changed so much, right? It's no longer teaching what they know and sharing that knowledge. It's more of what are the skills and the tools I can develop in these students to help them critically think when there's a situation. Or I think if there's one takeaway from this, the word I would use is agility. How do we develop that agility in our students, that whatever tool they're using today for Agile or, for the database, SQLs, when it changes to something else, they're able to adapt and go with the flow and learn the new tools and technology. So I think having that agility and adaptability kind of mindset is really what I would suggest educators to focus on. So it's not so much about the syntax and scoring 100% in that algorithm test, but it's more of understanding how to adapt and change themselves to what's going on in the industry so they can keep up with any disruptions coming their way.
Well, I also think, and Lisa can probably speak to this a little bit more, but I also think that puts a lot of onus on the educators, because if you need to learn a new skill, I mean, because technology is changing so often, it requires educators to learn as you teach, right? That it's not just, I know this specific programming language and I have it down cold and now I'm going to go teach it. It's we're learning and teaching at the same time. So being able to adapt and help your students kind of see that adaptability is so important. I love that, Priya. Thank you.
I'm teaching things that didn't exist.
Yeah.
But I kind of view technology as this mountain that you're climbing, and so, you have a really good base, and then as you're climbing up and you reach the summit and you think, oh, I know so much. And then you look up and the mountain has grown. So you're not at the summit anymore. That's what it's like. But, like I said, it's not boring. So.
Yeah, you can either view that as, a hurdle to be overcome, or you can, let that kind of discourage you. And so helping students see the pathway to lifelong learning. I love the enthusiasm that you need to be able to tackle that. Nick, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share?
I think building on top of that, the importance of educators being willing to do the lifelong learning to show their students, this is how you should be. It's okay. Because there's always going to be those professors that don't go that way. And it's important for students to see that things do change. Let's change with it. I would also very much echo the soft skills things. I was a very stereotypical IT person, not very outgoing or sociable. And I learned those soft skills through my internships and starting the workplace. But I think it's awesome that Lisa teaches those in her classes and that their university supports that.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know about how much of an IT person you were before, because I met Nick when he was in high school, and I would think that he had a great personality. So I don't know how much I agree with that portion of the comment, but I do agree with what you said, that it's about teachers being able to show that they're learning along the way too, because I think there's a lot of connection that comes from students being able to see that their educators are also learning. We had a webinar last month where an engineering teacher actually works in Apple's app development program. And so he talked about, when I first started this class, I was about a week ahead of my students. And so if they'd ask a question that I didn't know the answer to, I'd say, you know what, let's learn this together. And I really think that there's value in that. With technology changing so quickly, there are going to be times where we don't have the answers. And so being able to say, I don't know, but let's figure it out together is, I think, one thing that students are all looking for. And the educators want to be able to see, we don't know everything, but that doesn't mean that we can't figure it out. And there's a lot for us to learn. So, well, I wanted to give everyone, all of our panelists, one last chance to share any additional thoughts. There's been so much that's been shared that I think is so valuable to all of our educators. Anything else that you guys wanted to share before we wrap up?
Hannah, I just happened to look at your schedule, all the webinars you've been doing this last month. It's really impressive. I think this is great that we are getting ahead of the game and talking about, what companies are looking for, what is the industry looking for, and how do we prepare our students from much early on in their, not only in their careers, but even early on in their life. Nick's point of starting computer science sometime in second grade, I mean, that is really impressive, in terms of where we're heading and what's ahead of us. So I want to give you a big kudos, for driving a lot of these sessions and making it super helpful for everyone.
Well, thank you. Oh, that was so nice. Thank you for saying that. I just think there's so much value in professionals and educators coming together to talk about these types of things, taking a little bit of time out of your day, which I know all of you do, to do a little bit of that professional development. And I'm hoping that all of our attendees saw value in what was shared today, because I know I did. Thank you so much, Priya, Lisa, Nick, for sharing all of your thoughts with us this afternoon. We'll be posting the full recording for this session on the Certiport YouTube page. If you have any questions, we will be sending out a follow-up email with the link to the recording. Feel free to touch base with us. We're more than happy to answer any of your questions. And we're so grateful for all that you've shared with us today. So thank you to our amazing panelists, and thank you those who were able to join. We're grateful that you spent a little bit of your afternoon with us. So we'll wrap things up as our final IT Specialist Academy webinar has finished. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with us. We're more than happy to follow up. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.